Whether you love competitive racing, building the ultimate car collection, or customizing and staring at your dream car, Gran Turismo 7 has something to offer for car enthusiasts and the car curious alike. Unleash your inner speed demon in the rewarding campaign to learn the ropes and unlock new cars that you can add to your extensive collection and tune to your heart's content. Want to know how realistic Gran Turismo 7's real driving simulator features are? Well, we tapped the talents of Mr. JWW to let us know whether or not it was the real deal. Presented by Gran Turismo 7.
So hello, my name's James. You may know me online as Mr. JWW. I guess you would call me a content creator, YouTuber, definitely a petrol head. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some clips from Gran Turismo 7. The first thing that I'm going to share with you is Café mode, which allows players who may not necessarily be familiar with how a proper driving simulator works to be able to familiarize themselves with how it all unfolds. This is a great way of easing your way into it and allowing you to unlock new cars along your journey. Now, this is all about the cornering stage. So it might seem pretty basic, but it's all about trying to learn to corner properly, adapting to the physics of the car in the game. There's probably no better circuit for it. We're on the Nürburgring here, of which there are over 100 corners here. So if there was ever a stretch of tarmac to adapt to it, it's this right here. You can see straight away what's really helpful is you've got these pins effectively in front of you. Now these pins indicate the apexes. So if you can keep your eye on those pins and make sure you hit them on the way around, that's effectively helping you on what is known as the racing line. There are certain sections of this track where it's actually blind over hills. So if it wasn't for these pins at first, you might not necessarily know where you're going. In the world of racing on track, we've got what's known as the wet line, which is different to the dry line. Whoops, he's just gone and put one wheel on the grass there, which is, that's a classic error where in the dry, it'd be fine. But in the wet, if you put one tire on the grass, your car begins to turn like a tank. You would typically stay off the curbs as well. Curbs typically are painted, and when paint gets wet against the rubber on your tires, it's often really slippy. So your general flow on a wet race is completely different than a dry race, as of course is your overall pace too. So stay off the grass, because otherwise you'll end up spinning and generally take a different, slightly slower line. When you look at oval racing from the outside, it looks like quite a basic thing because you're effectively driving around in circles. But the idea of this is balancing the car, the tires, the physics, the weight on its very, very edge, like its extreme limits. It's almost the ultimate, really, in terms of car control, because you're keeping that car at its edge of physics at all time. So this might seem a sort of basic practice, but what often happens is you think you've got loads of tarmac, you've got loads of space, and as you begin to build up confidence, and that's when things start to gradually go wrong as the car reaches its edge of traction. Yeah, definitely good to spend some time on the bowl. There are cars which specifically qualify for races in the series that only they are allowed to enter into. So that might be the fact that they're front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, they might have certain horsepower, certain weight, there might be genres of cars. So maybe you can only enter if it's a Japanese car or a hot hatch. So this is the area where you're able to select that car. And then it goes on to the tuning. I don't think I've seen any better representation of how many variables there are when it comes to tuning a car like this page here. I mean, you can do everything from tires, differential, gear ratios, horsepower, ride height. I mean, look at this. We've got air filters, exhaust brakes, you name it. If you can tune it in the real world, it's in here. And the phenomenal thing is the physics engine of this, when you choose and tune something in this section, it will have a real knock-on effect to how the car feels when you eventually jump back on track. So just say, for argument's sake, you've upgraded the brakes and you've upgraded the tires. Generally, you'll have a shorter stopping distance, better turn-in from the tires, better grip. Maybe your tires will last longer. It's a really good way of dipping into the tuning world early, and you'll quite quickly become to learn what's the trade-off in expense and performance. sport mode, this is kind of where things get real, I guess, because you're racing against real people rather than AI. The idea of this is also to build up and build awareness around racing etiquette. Now, I think this is a really great feature because in the sim world, there's no real actions if you were to decide to tap someone's rear bumper to cause them to spin out, other than one very annoyed person halfway around the world from you. But if you're in the real world and that happens, it's a real bad day out. One of the great things about these is they're so tightly matched. So they go around like a shoal of fish, it's like a really tight bunch of cars. But what can happen in a situation like this is you can very quickly start to swap paint. Sometimes, you'll stick a wheel on the grass and you'll end up spinning out and collecting someone else, which is a racing incident. But if you can try your best to not do what that guy just did, it will stand you in really good stead. If you join a race and it's a well organized event and someone has joined in who just doesn't care and ends up smashing you off what might have been a lap record for you, you can probably appreciate how that is next level annoying. This particular footage was uploaded by Fire. Thanks to him for sharing. This is an example of people who have put in the quote seat time. That's what we call the act of spending a lot of time racing cars. You can see here it's super close, it's super tight, but while these guys are aggressive, the etiquette is strong. You could barely fit a piece of paper between some of these guys when they race, but they're trying their best to obviously keep the machinery between the greenery, as it were. Seat time is really important. Don't underestimate how difficult it is to drive a car like this. These are running what's known as slicks and wings, which means it's running a soft, slick compound tire together with a high downforce car. They use ground force and downforce to generate weight that presses the car down into the asphalt. The driving technique of this takes a long time to learn. So to watch these guys racing around here like this in cars like that is truly cool. This is the used car dealership, and remarkably, it's incredibly familiar. The chances are, if you're watching this, if you're into this, you're a petrol head, which means you probably spend a lot of time in the classifieds looking at cars. The price of JDM cars, so JDM standing for Japanese Domestic Market. Right now, we've seen this crazy bubble of these cars fetching money over Aston Martin, over Ferrari. They're really punchy prices. If you were to get a NER-spec R34 Nissan GTR, they are like Ferrari cash now. I mean, it's just gone wild. And it's great to see that actually reflected in-game. If you're into the idea of curating a special collection of cars, or that is a functionality of GT7, is super cool. So yeah, this I would be spending a lot of time in. The variety of cars, the detail and the exotica which is on show here is incredible. Now, as part of this, there are what's known as effectively invite-only cars. And I find that concept quite interesting, actually, because it's very similar to the real world. Take a brand, for example, like Ferrari or like Porsche. When they launch a flagship supercar or a flagship hypercar, you can't just walk into a dealership and go, I would like one of those, please, which I know is a very strange concept for someone that sells cars, but they typically make them in very small quantities. So you have to have a track record of ownership of pretty much everything else which they've made in the last few years, have history of engaging with the brand, and all of these actions count towards your profile. And the more profile you build, the closer you get to unlocking these cars in real life. And weirdly, it's kind of exactly the same as this in the game. You can't just go to the top and unlock a car. You have to earn your stripes by seat time or achievements or having a particular affiliation with a brand, which I think is cool. Another element of this game is the concept car side of things. Basically, in no world do you get to experience what a concept car might drive like. The majority of brands, they launch a concept car to indicate what the future design language of their brand might be over the next few years. They'll often display innovative new tech. And what's great about it is there's no rules. So what's really cool is in GT7, they then take what the physics benchmark of that car would be if it were to be made, plumb all of the data in here, and you get to experience it, which, having a feel of how accurate this physics engine is absolutely bonkers. Look how direct and twitchy that is. I mean, that's going in, what was that? 596 kilometers an hour, and still being able to turn as twitchy as that would say. It's got more downforce than a human neck would be able to take. So yeah, this is one of those rare and really interesting opportunities to play with physics in a world where you otherwise wouldn't. So we've gone from super extreme hyper concept cars with like neck breaking downforce and speed to grassroots. This is really where you learn it. Look at that, 6-speed sequential shifter kart. And this, for me, is the distillation of why Gran Turismo is really the ultimate driving sim, because it's not disregarding anything. You know, you can have classic cars, muscle cars, hypercars, concept cars, and then go all the way down to what is probably or arguably the most distilled form of pure driving, which is, of course, a go-kart. This is GT Auto. Now, this is where you can come and customize your car. And that's not to be confused with tuning. So tuning and customization are two different things. I guess we can associate tuning more on the sort of performance aspect, whereas in GT Auto, this is more your personal style. How you style your car is a representation of you, and to be able to spend time to not only experience these cars but completely customize them and change them, I think is great. I mean, look at this. So what is on screen right now is what's known as end plates. These are just the sort of end caps of a rear wing. The fact that they've even gone to the degree of being able to offer what end plates you have on your wing is unbelievable. You can spend hours in here customizing your car, getting it to a look and stance and feel and color that suits you, and then off you go. And really, if you want to get lost in a whole new world, spend a few hours tuning your car, a few hours customizing your car, and then there's photo mode where you can then place this car in real world environments. I've been there and I've spent many an hour getting lost in it, and it is awesome. Thanks for hanging out with me. It's been a pleasure to share the insight into GT7. If you like cars, you might want to follow me online at Mr. JWW, and hopefully I'll see you out on track.
Enjoy the real driving simulator yourself. Pad out your dream garage and race to the finish in Gran Turismo 7. Available now on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 consoles. And on the PlayStation 5, push your senses to the limit. Enjoy the feel of the road thanks to the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback. Or hear the roar of the surrounding engines thanks to the PS5's 3D audio. For more on Gran Turismo 7, stay tuned to IGN. Presented by Gran Turismo 7.